Please state your name and date of birth.
Bob Zaugh, 12/6/44.
What years did you live in Venice?
I lived there from 75 to 82, and I came back in like 89 to 92, something like that. We printed for the Venice Canal Festival, and I lived on the canals. And we had events that I was part of, like when Greg Nelson, who lived on the ocean front, decided to not just refuse induction, but refuse to register, and then refuse to show up in court. And he had a big, what do you call it? He was chained to an altar. It was a sanctuary, live on television. I was chained to the altar with him, and so he was from Venice. That's the kind of thing that was going on down here. Peace Press was formed out of the resistance in SDS. You know, when during the Vietnam War, people didn't want to print what we wanted to say. You couldn't get a commercial printer to do that. So a guy named Jerry Palmer from the SDS, he bought a press. He's kind of a physical genius. He put it together, taught himself how to print, and then he taught us how to print. My version of the SDS and the resistance were people who took it upon themselves to not cooperate with the draft, and taking personal responsibility by refusing to register or turning in your draft cards, and taking steps from there. Like, social change happens when you go up to that place that holds you in with fear, some new law, like you can't burn your draft card, you can't desecrate the flag, and you decide to step over that line. That's where it starts. If you don't step over that line, there's no social change, period. So that's what we did. And they called me for a physical. I refused to take it publicly. Then they declared me delinquent. They sent me an order for induction. I refused induction. All these are felonies. Then you wait for your indictment, and this is what people did. And we had a commune downtown at the time, and 4 of the people in my house all had the same federal judge, Judge Harry Pragerson, the best judge in the U.S. He's right up there with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So, you know, people would go to prison, and I was fortunate to not go to prison. Well, we had Greg Nelson, we had Bill Garraway, Winter Dellenbach, Mike Schwartz, Richard Perfumo. I moved in, like, after my trial, I moved into the canal. So, but, you know, those of us who were not in jail were still actively doing things. So we had, those are just people that I know from the resistance that were in Venice. Now, the SDS, their position was, we represent the masses. We can do whatever we want. You know, they would come in and use the press. We had a little AB deck, and then they wouldn't clean the ink off. They would just leave, because we're the SDS. We represent the masses. That's what they'd tell me, and that can ruin your press. And in the meantime, you know, we were serious about what we did, and we faced the consequences and survived it.
You brought some documents about some of the resistance, the presence in Venice, and what was taking place in terms of surveillance. Do you want to share some of that right
well,
now?
Sure. One of the things that happened was the government at the time was going around starting conspiracy trials. They would try to find some rule that you'd broken, then they would call you before a grand jury, but not locally, in Arizona. So you're 400 miles away from home, and they would ask you questions. They would start a fishing expedition, and if you answer a question, then you got to answer all questions. So you have to take the 5th. And this couple was living in Venice, right on the corner of Oceanfront Walk and Venice Boulevard. They were living at a house owned by Lee Weinberg, who worked at UCLA, and her husband was a professor at UCLA, ex-husband. And they, one of them went to Arizona to buy dynamite because they were planning to blow up the ROTC building at UCLA. So the government came after them with an indictment. This is the transcript. It says there is intensive police surveillance of the oceanfront walk house, including agents staked out to watch it 12 hours a day, obvious telephone taps, filming it from a nearby lifeguard tower, people leaving it, being followed, etc. Lee and her ex-husband Carl, who lives elsewhere, are the legal owners of the house. We knew there was surveillance, and so we would meet on the beach with lawyers like Carson Taylor from People's College of Law, and we'd meet on the beach because they knew the government had boom mics and they were listening in. So you didn't meet in any house or anywhere, and they would talk to people out there. Some nights we would sit up at a house on 3rd Street on the porch because people's tires were getting slashed. So people would sit on the porch with shotguns waiting to see what would happen. And finally, our lawyer got back to us, Carson Taylor, and he said, well, we found out what's going on. It's the police. That means there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to put up with it. You know, I certainly respect what Venice does and how it stands up for, you know, the underdog and what's right and so on. Currently, you know, the whole thing with that church that was turned over to Jay Penske, and you know how people have battled back against that, and how the underground newspaper, the Beachhead, has been going for what, over 50 years? I think it's one of the only papers like that in the country. That hippie beatnik vibe has stayed, and it's just not anywhere else. I've been all over this city. It's not anywhere else. You can actually see it. You know, you come to the border of Venice, Santa Monica, which is what, right across the street here? And it's totally different on that side of the street. They don't allow people, you know, laying down overnight. They just don't allow it. I mean, you see it occasionally, but in Venice, it's like it's a lifestyle. In the 50s, and early 60s, it was the coffee houses and the beat generation, and so those people came in here and they just stayed, you know, it's decrepit, falling apart. We love it. You know?